Okay, it is 6:30, so I will call to order a meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. It is Monday, October 24th, and we are at the OSD Innovation Center in Oregon High School. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Garrison? Yes. Ms. Bijak? Here. Dr. Lakuta? Here. Mr. LeBrun?
Present.
Mr. Pankratz?
Present.
Ms. Wright? Present. Ms. Flanagan?
Present. Board does have a quorum, and I do have from Ms. Heitz that this meeting has been duly noticed, so we are good there. Before I entertain a motion to approve the agenda, we'll just go through what's on tap for tonight. We do have two important action items, which is the approval of the budget as well as the approval of the tax levy. And then we will have an update on the operational referendum if anyone has any questions on that. And then an important part of this evening is grades 7 through 12. We will hear from the principals at those schools with their goal presentations. So that is on tap for tonight. So I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Sir.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. All right, next on the agenda is consent calendar. Normal items tonight, you did see that we do have some staff changes that was in your packet. And then in terms of donations, we have two. Harbor Freight Tools, $250 for the OHS Woods program, and then Fetch Rewards, $1,500 for the OHS Tech Ed Department. So we want to thank those organizations for their donations to our programs. We really appreciate that. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Next on the agenda is B, information items. I just wanted to take a couple minutes. I forgot to say this at the outset of the meeting. It's kind of been an unsettling little week in our Oregon community. And so I did want to take a few minutes and really just talk about how the community came together. I want to thank our public safety agencies for their responses and also their wonderful communication with the Oregon School District. We are a major part of this community. We have children that live in every area of the community, so their communication with us, as well as their swift responses, are very appreciated by us. I also did want to recognize a couple unsung heroes in our school district. When the explosion happened, our counselors at the high school took time to look in Infinite Campus and see the students that lived in those areas and made sure that they had conversations with them and got in touch with their parents before they went home. And then also in terms of our transportation team, knowing that kids would be going home on the bus to those areas and the roads were closed. And so really taking the time, and they actually met the bus so those kids could be walked home. And so when we talk about caring and professional educators, that is exactly what we're talking about. So I wanted to take a few minutes and really give those individuals our appreciation as a Board of Education and on behalf of this community. So thank you. All right, moving on to public comment. I will read Policy 180 because we do have some people for public comment. District Policy 180.05 provides an opportunity for the public to address the board. We value the public comment period and feedback from our stakeholders. To comply with open meetings law and to ensure consistency, public comment will have the following parameters. Speakers will have 3 minutes in which to make their comments. Ms. Katie Heitz will signal the speaker when their time is up. The board will not comment after each speaker and will reserve discussion to any items on the agenda. Speakers are welcome to stay for the meeting. Next steps following public comment may include referral to the appropriate administrator for follow-up with the speaker or placement of the matter on a future board agenda. Okay, first up we have Pam Peterson. Pam, if you want to come up to the microphone, state your name and your address, and then the floor is yours.
Although we no longer have children in the district, we fully support the referendum. Unfortunately, due to lack of funding, the state has given the district no choice if we want to continue to pay our educators a living wage. We believe education is the foundation of a healthy community state, and nation, and teachers are the cornerstone of that foundation. We are happy to invest in the education of the children of Oregon, as others did for our kids while they were still in school. We hope you'll join us in voting yes for the OSD referendum.
All right, thank you. Next up is Karen Davidson.
Hi, my name's Karen Davidson. My address is 770 Scott Street in Oregon. I'm the parent of, is this on? Okay. Okay. I'm a parent of 2 children in this district, and we have lived here for 9 years. I'm also a new substitute teacher and paraprofessional in the district and used to be a full-time classroom teacher out of state many years ago. I know many people are worried about passing the school district referendum. They are worried about inflation and the impact of higher taxes on their household budgets. Some people are concerned about the possibility of having to leave the district due to rising expenses. At the same time, the school district and the employees that are part of it do not operate in a vacuum. The district itself is impacted by higher costs of things like food and energy. District employees and their households are impacted by inflation just as other households are. In addition, the state of Wisconsin is sitting on billions of dollars of taxpayer money that could be released to school districts, but the legislature has not done that. Also, going to referendum to cover expenses has become a common practice for school districts across the state ever since the state legislature put revenue limits in place in the early 1990s in response to taxpayer concerns about rising tax bills to fund public schools. 7 out of 10 Wisconsin school districts went to referendum just between 2016 and 2020. The school district administration has already taken steps to reduce costs. It has switched health insurance, which wasn't a popular decision, and has restructured debt. Unfortunately, I don't think there are any easy answers to this issue. People are understandably worried about rising costs. Voting against the referendum would be a way to control some of the rising costs when a lot of costs are unfortunately out of our control. However, the reality also is that we are part of a system and a community. We pool our money to pay for things that we care about that are for public use, such as roads and schools and parks, so that most people who need or want those things will have access. It also costs money to maintain and take care of those things. What do we value? What are our priorities? It's a question we continually have to reevaluate. It costs money to have an educated population, whether the money comes from the state or local level. Right now, it's not coming from the state, and right now the best way to give educators raises and attract good educators to our community is to vote in a referendum to pay for that. If the referendum does not pass, the cost to kids and educators in our community would potentially be too high. I want to keep quality educators and lower classroom sizes in Oregon. At work, I get to see thoughtful and dedicated teachers and staff in action, and every year I'm happy to see what my own kids are learning, even though they each have different needs. I want everyone working with our kids to be paid in accordance with their position, training, and time they spend on the job, so I am voting yes on the referendum. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is Martha Klug.
Hello, my name is Martha Klug. I live at 351 Oakwood Drive. I'm here to thank the board for voting to move the referendum forward. I grew up here, and it's all I knew was the Oregon School District, and so I didn't necessarily appreciate it as much as I should have. I always loved my education enough so to want to become a teacher. And then when I went to school at UW-Milwaukee, I saw a very different kind of school district through all of the Milwaukee, UWM goes through the Milwaukee public school system, and you actually graduate with an urban education degree. So it was completely different than Oregon, and my appreciation grew. And then I moved back, and as a community member and mom of kids in the district and teacher in the district, my appreciation for Oregon grew further. And I just think that the impacts that our school has on the greater community are uncomparable to anything else present in the community. And we want to keep the schools not only a place for students, but a place for that teachers want to be. Time after time, conversations with people, if they're not classmates of mine that I've known forever, that they're still here for the same reasons I am. I meet new members in the community, and oh, why'd you move here? And it's always the schools. It really just is always this, oh, we're here for the schools. And they say it in a way like, not like they're going to explain why. It's the schools. Like, I know, everybody knows we have really good schools, and we need money to keep them running. And that's what it is. I don't want to pay more money towards it either, but it is what it is in the situation we're in. Our priorities should be in education and should be in maintaining the integrity of school that we have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That concludes public comment, unless there's anyone else here for public comment. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to information item 2, OEA report. And I believe we do have a representative from the OEA here, so if you want to come up to the microphone, thank you.
Hi, I'm Beth Klain, a special education teacher at Netherwood Knoll Elementary School. I'm here on behalf of OEA to read a statement. The Oregon Education Association Board of Directors, as the duly elected representatives of the teachers of the Oregon School District, endorses the Oregon School District's operational referendum on the ballot this November. We remind everyone that this is a critical moment for public education in Oregon and throughout the state, and encourage everyone to vote yes on November 8th.
All right, thank you. B, information item number 3 is our student report, and I'm happy to see that we have students here tonight. So, Peyton and Olivia, do you want to introduce yourselves? And then the floor is yours for your report.
I'm Olivia, I'm a junior.
And I'm Peyton, and I'm also a junior.
So to start off our report, we had homecoming a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, we did lose the football game, but the dance went very well. Student council put in a lot of work in planning for setting up the dance and all of the homecoming week.
Some other information we wanted to share is that a lot of our clubs are back up and running in what we would expect, including trips, special guests, and just being able to host more events to a wider variety of people, which is exciting to see. We just recently had an orchestra concert here at the high school, as well as allowing the middle schoolers to host Shrek the Musical this last weekend. Rockapella also just visited, and Noteworthy performed along with the Blue Devil Beats from Evansville as their opener. Fall sports are coming to an end, though a lot of our teams have been moving on to regionals and state, including golf, where Drew and Addison went to states, volleyball, who just competed in a regional final, tennis, who went to states with Ella Piotr going again for the 3rd year, I believe, and our boys soccer team, who also just played in their regional finals. The PSAT was also just able to be offered by the district, which is a great opportunity because a lot of districts aren't able to host their own standardized testing, and there was a large turnout of both juniors and sophomores at that event.
And then the Superintendent Student Advisory Council, which is a club we're both a part of, we've been starting to run a positivity and well-being campaign. So we have many ideas we want to put in place. Our first thing that we have been doing is to decorate mirrors in the bathrooms. So we have done 4 bathrooms and then a staff bathroom as well, as a way just to brighten up the school day. We also have many ideas we hope to put in place throughout the year, not only in the high school but also throughout the district.
Right, thank you. Busy fall. Thanks for being here. Okay, moving on to C, action items. First action item is approval of our 2022-2023 original budget. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Andy Weiland.
Thank you. There we are. So I wanted to just briefly talk about this slide. As I've been in the budget mode, so to speak, the complexity of the budget, as I've talked to people, is very relevant in their conversations. So I wanted to give a feel for what's going on with the budget with just this quick slide. For the most part, the majority of our discussions are kind of talking about what's going on the left side of that organizational chart of funds. And for the most part, it's the operational fund, Fund 10, our special revenue fund related to special education, Fund 27, and then our non-referendum debt fund. Those are all the funds that are related to our revenue limit. And our revenue limit, as you've been hearing over the last several months, a good part of the year probably, was held back to a zero increase per pupil for not only this year, but actually last year as well. And so you kind of get a feel for that. For the most part, these are the funds that we're dealing with when we're talking about that. And so I want to give you a feel for that. On the right side of the fund, or on the chart, you do have some smaller funds that we work with. Some of them do contribute funds from property taxes. Mainly just the community education fund is involved with that. And it's a fairly small part of our levy. But I'll talk about that in a second. So here are the revenue trends by the state, and just wanted to kind of show this again. You can see that in the past we've had some zeros on the revenue limit side, but you could see that the per pupil aid allocation, that's a different way that the state gives us funds, kind of depends on which political party is in charge as to where those funds come from. Were actually giving us money. So either way, if you looked at both of them, there was always money coming in as far as flexibility. But if you notice at the top of the chart, unfortunately in 2021, 22, and in 22, 23, we did not have additional funds coming in, and that's why we find ourselves in the position of needing to go to referendum. So this is an equation that I like to talk about a little bit. It's the revenue limit. What is that? And it's basically a way to hold spending down from school districts, even though it says revenue. If you don't put money into the kitty, so to speak, you can't spend the money. So it does limit what we can spend. And then it has an interesting relationship to equalization aid. As equalization aid increases, it actually lowers the property taxes for the operating funds. So other funds, like I said, the debt service fund and the community ed fund aren't restricted by the revenue limit, but the funds that I talked about before, the educational fund, special education fund, and the non-referendum debt are restricted in there. So you can kind of see as equalization goes up, property taxes the size of the property tax increase goes down. So this is my favorite sheet, but we chopped it into two pieces tonight because the numbers get a little bit small. So these are the operating funds. So we put them together for you so that you're not burdened with the rest of the sheet, and we'll talk about that next. But basically, we kind of included the assigned components of the general fund balance on the top there in Fund 10. And then we talk about the amount of revenue that we anticipate. Again, everything that I'm presenting tonight is without the referendum. Until the end, I show you the impact of a referendum passing with a tax limit. But for the numbers related to the budget, they're without the referendum. And since it's out without the referendum, it also is without any any increases in salaries for any employee groups or benefit increases associated with those salary increases. So kind of everything's lockstep of where it has been the last couple years as far as salaries and benefits. So again, you have the educational fund, the revenues, the expenditures, and then you'll see, this is a point to make, you'll see a negative $5,390,000. That's something that we've been talking about, and you'll see it jumping from the education fund down to the special education fund. And that's simply because the state of Wisconsin hasn't really been paying for special education as well as other states. And so we have to transfer money from the educational fund into our special education area in order to compensate for that. So you see that almost $4 million moving from the education fund into the special education fund. And then we get down to our fund balance at the end of the year. You'll see it decreasing by about $2.6 million. Most of that, or all of that most of it is related to the assigned fund balances that are on the left-hand side. This model projects that we would actually spend all that money. Unlikely, very unlikely, because we typically have had a little bit of carryover. But I would wager that that number will be significantly less than what it was this year. Some of our spending has been restrained because of the pandemic, and so there are a lot of projects that will probably or will happen this year that haven't happened in the past simply because the pandemic has kind of slowed us down from different components of it. So the other part of it, I did qualify that, is related to a structural deficit in Fund 10. This is the first structural deficit, and when I say structure, I mean a reoccurring deficit that's going to happen each year if we don't figure out a way to fix it since I've been here, and since a board policy has been in place for 20-some years. And so what you're going to hear at the end of this presentation is we're going to actually need multiple motions to approve this budget. And it's going to take a supermajority of board members to approve the budget. And that's because of Policy 611, which says that if we're going to have kind of a structural deficit, it basically talks about assigned fund balances, but the intent is a structural deficit that's going to reoccur, then, and we're going to basically use fund balance to fill that hole for 1 year, then the board members need to kind of weigh in on that and make sure that the majority of you, the supermajority of you, is all okay with that. That structural deficit this year is about $170,000. That is less than what I had anticipated originally. We had some additional one-time funds come in from the governor, as well as a unique component of the revenue limit, which I could bore you with. But basically, because the state did not fund the increase per pupil of the that's normally happening, which is the sheet I showed you a little bit ago, there was a double exemption that happened within the revenue limit. And the double exemption actually increased our revenue limit for 1 year, which I was not anticipating because we had a slight reduction in enrollment. So because of that slight reduction in enrollment, which was caused by a difference between our senior class and from last year and our kindergarten class this year, basically we got an extra $130,000 in revenue limit authority for 1 year. And next year, assuming enrollment was the same as this year and our 3-year average didn't change, we would lose the $130,000 plus another $130,000, so there'd be a $250,000 reduction in our revenue limit next year. Now, again, that's a question of what happens with our enrollment this next year, but that's the direction we're going right now. We do anticipate, with the growth that we're seeing in residences, that we will compensate for any disparities between our kindergarten classes and our senior class this year. We'll see how that plays out, but that is a concern. So because of that $170,000 structural deficit, it will take a vote, two votes, I guess, to utilize those funds, what those funds are going to be used for, and then the third vote would be to approve the budget. So 3 separate motions we'll need when we're done presenting here after questions. So continuing on, the non-referendum debt service, you'll see a small reduction there. Nothing to be concerned about that. This is actually our last payment for our non-referendum debt, and so we are emptying the account. And the account had accumulated about $32,000 of interest earnings and those types of things over the time period. So we will be using that when this when this fiscal year is over. There will be no money left in the non-referendum debt fund unless, no, there will be no money left over. We had talked about, you may recall, doing a tennis court project, and we are still hoping to do that this next year. And then we could issue some additional non-referendum debt. But that's what happened with that project was we weren't able to coat the tennis courts in time for the girls' tennis season, and we certainly didn't want to mess up anybody's tennis season because we had somebody that was able to go to state. So we elected to delay that project until this next summer. All right, I'm going to go on to the other funds real quick. So another fund that's in the 20 series of funds is called our Special Projects Fund. That's really where we run our student activities accounts out of it, or if someone were to give us a gift, a restricted gift for a certain purpose, that's where that fund is. And typically we run about $500,000 out of there. Again, this is not used for staff or anything like that. It's really used for things related to student activities. That's what it basically is. You'll see our long-term capital improvement fund that we started a few years ago still has that remaining $100 in it. Hoping to get that maybe to 101 with the interest rates increasing here, but we'll eventually be able to hopefully fund that a little bit more. The reason we started that fund, just as a reminder for folks, is there's a time clock on that, and it starts, you can't spend any of the money out of it for 5 years after you start it, so we put the $100 just to start the clock. The referendum bond funds, these are the funds that were sold to build roam corners and to do security improvements. So we are still kind of working that account down from its balance. It was actually also allowed us to purchase some land, but we do have a little bit of money left over. Any money that we have kind of left over at the end of this fiscal year, and we have spent some of that already, by the way, I would anticipate probably moving that to the debt service fund. That's kind of what you're supposed to do if you have remaining funds left over. And then it can be used to call debt or to under levy in the debt service fund in the future if you wanted to. Food Service Fund is a standalone fund. It does have state and federal dollars that come into it based on the number of student meals that we sell. And then obviously our local parents contribute to that fund as well to basically pay for the operations of the food service program and the food. So that is staff salaries and benefits as well as for the food that we serve to our students. The next funds that we're going to talk about real briefly are our Employee Trust Fund and our OPEB Liability Fund. Those are both trust funds set up specifically for the benefit of our employees. And they're basically set up for our employees as after they retire from the school district. So the first fund, the trust fund, is really related to sick leave conversion. When our employees leave our employment or retire from our employment, we allow them to convert some of that money, similar to the way the state does, into perhaps no, not perhaps, for health insurance purposes. So very similar to the way the state does that. And so that's where we keep that money until our employees need to access it. The next line item, OPEB liability. OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits, and that is for health insurance. So while the first item on there may pay for the employee's portion of health insurance, the OPEB fund pays for up to 90% of the health insurance for our employees for up to 4 years, but then it doesn't pay everything. It only pays 90% of that cost. So between those two accounts, our employees can pay for their health insurance for a few years after they retire. Our pool fund is, our community education funds are actually broken down into 3 different funds. Our pool that we rerun at the district, as well as our community education programming. So that's that booklet that everybody gets in their mail. And then our Performing Arts Center, which is in this building. So those 3 different purposes all run in the community education fund and are partially funded through taxes. And we'll talk about how much that is in a little bit here. Our last fund on my special sheet, my favorite sheet, is our cooperative purchases fund, and that's related to working with other districts. Mostly that is our Carl Perkins program, where Greg Granberg holds a licensure and is able to manage kind of job training funds from the federal government over multiple school districts in the area. And so basically that goes into that account and goes out of that account. There are no property taxes or local funds into that account. So I'm going to back up and just ask if there's any questions related to the budget. You bet.
So I may have missed this before or I forgot. It's possible. So I didn't realize that food service actually pays for the salary and benefits of our food service workers.
Yeah.
So with looking at the referendum and all of the salary and benefits, are food service workers compensated correctly as far as like what we would expect to see outside of the school district?
I don't know if Gina wants to tackle that one.
So I want to make sure I understand your question. So if you're asking if they're paid consistently with other employees in our district or other food service employees in our surrounding districts?
Oh.
other food service employees in the surrounding districts. I'm not looking to compare them to, say, a para or a teacher or anything like that, but like are we comparable to where they could go outside of Oregon to get paid?
So I would say right now, just because we've had 0 increases the past 2 years, that we are on the lower end of our comparable districts. And so they would be part of the staff that is, in part of that 11.4 million that would be calculated to receive an increase, as well as our other staff, because we are now on the lower end where other districts have given increases and we have not been able to do that. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. So then if the salary and benefits comes out of Fund 50 and that is supplied by federal government and people paying in for their meals, is the reason we weren't able to give raises for that section because we essentially the last 2 years haven't paid for meals? Is that, or I'm confused on that part.
No, I think the reason that we did that was basically to be consistent with all the employee groups and to treat everybody the same way. We felt like treating one group differently than the others would not be a great idea.
And that makes perfect sense. Thank you very much.
And I would add to that too, that with us having to charge for meals, that we also didn't know if that trend is going to continue. So again, if we do a wage increase, then we have to be confident that we can afford that into the future.
All right, any other questions for Andy on the original budget before we move into the motions? Go ahead, Anna.
I know that you've explained this, and I just want to ask if we know whether or not, related to the number of students and the graduating class being larger than our incoming kindergarten class, do we have a sense of whether that senior class was a larger than normal class, or was it an average class, and we just are seeing, obviously we are seeing smaller enrollment because of the situation with family dynamics in our community and elsewhere? But I'm just curious if you have a sense of that.
Yeah, I would say it was probably 20-ish larger than normal, something like that. I mean, our classes are kind of right around the 300 range when they get into the high school level. And I think that one was a little bit larger than that last year. So I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the senior class this year is a little bit smaller than last year's. So hopefully that gap will decrease. And then we did see some inward migration at all the other most of the other grade levels. It was a little slower than what we anticipated, so we'll see what happens. There are a number of residential projects that are out there, especially in Village of Oregon and Terravessa and some other areas in Fitchburg. So we're thinking that we're going to see some more growth, even though the birth rate's down a little bit. Kind of have faith that that's going to pull us through.
Thank you. And I had one other question. You mentioned receiving additional one-time funds. Are you referring to that same one-time funds that we've been talking about at a couple of meetings, or was there another one-time fund allocation?
The revenue limit increase was not anticipated because we didn't anticipate a reduction in our enrollment. So that's additional one-time funds that was out there that we haven't talked about in the past. Yep. And then there was a small one that was about $30,000 related to open enrollment. DPI did an audit of open enrollment from last year and identified some students that we didn't get paid for that we should have. And so they gave it to us related to last year, which is great, except again, it's one time.
Yep. Great. That's the clarifications.
Yep.
Thank you.
Tim, anything from you?
Yeah, just one question. The one slide that was about where the revenue comes from, some of it came from the revenue limit per pupil aid, and they trade back and forth.
Yep. This one.
And so, what's the correlation between that trading back and forth? Is that political party?
Yes. Yeah. I don't like to say which party, but one party definitely does not believe in the revenue limit and the state aid formula and those types of things because it favors kind of an equalization component, which basically the equalization formula is how do I say this? it's almost like a Robin Hood formula. So the people that don't have as much property tax wealth, it tries to give them a little bit more equal resources.
Sure.
The other political party would rather just give a certain dollar amount per student, regardless of the property value that exists in that school district.
Okay, that's helpful to know.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for explaining that.
Yep.
All right, anyone from this side of the room have any questions? I don't have any questions. Okay, we've, and that shouldn't be seen as anything. We've been diving into this budget quite a bit this year, so I think most board members, which is different from a different year, we've scoured this thing back and forth. So, okay, so if there are no more questions, then as Andy talked about, we do have 3 motions that we need to approve because, as we've talked about, this is the first time we've had a deficit budget, so that means we've got to approve the use of $170,000 of unassigned general fund balance. So I will ask for that motion. So if you have your sheet before you, it's the first motion under summary and recommendation. So I'll ask someone to put that on the floor.
I'll make a motion, President Flanagan, to approve the use of $170,000 of unassigned general fund balance.
All right, does that motion have a second? Second. All right, is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. As Andy talked about, this does require a 2/3 majority, which is 5 board members. So I'll ask Katie to call the roll.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Okay, moving on to the second motion. I'll entertain that from someone to put on the floor.
I will make the motion. I move to approve the use of the $170,000 to temporary remedy the recurring deficit in the 2022-2023 original budget.
Okay, do we have a second for that motion? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that motion? Okay, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Okay, given that those 2 motions did pass, now I will entertain a motion to approve the 2022-2023 original budget as presented by Mr. Weiland.
I'll move to recommend the original budget as presented by Mr.
All right, is there a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that motion? Okay, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. We do have an approved budget for 2022-2023. Thank you, Andy.
You bet.
Okay, moving on to the next important action item of the evening, which is the approval of the tax levy. And now this again, Andy's going to talk us through, but we will approve 1 tax levy if the referendum passes, 1 tax levy if it fails, and then the third motion would be based on what happens, then to automatically authorize the district clerk, which is Anna, to certify the tax levy based on that result. So I'm going to turn it over to Andy to talk us through that.
I will try my best. Again, the complexity of this budget and this tax levy is second to none, and I think I win with the number of motions that I get you to approve this evening.
So you're saying your average motion to topic is high?
I'm getting on the high end of yes. So thank you for working with me on this. The tax levy we're talking about tonight, you can kind of see that it has stabilized from 2021, 2022, just a little bit of an increase. 2023 is, again, just a little bit of an increase, and then I show it with the referendum passing, which is a little bit higher of an increase. So just kind of wanted to give you a visual representation of that, and then we'll get into actually the numbers, which I haven't been able to share with you in the past because some of these numbers weren't completely known until relatively recently, but you can kind of get a feel for them from here. The tax levy for 2022-23 without the referendum passing would be just over $33 million. And you can see, and I want to point this out, that the mill rate from last year was $10.40. It would drop to $9.37. So that's a little over a 10% increase or decrease, I think. And then with the referendum passing, with the assessed values that have gone up, you actually see still a reduction of around 3% of the mill rate, going from 1040 to 1006. So now just so people understand, there is a significant increase in assessed value this year in everybody's homes. That's statewide. So when we talk about impact and the information that we talked about with the referendum, even though the rate is going down, we still do anticipate some amount of impact to people and their taxes if the referendum passes, because we know that people's assessments go up. So we're trying to be very upfront and honest and straightforward with our public, and that's why we put that information together. I will say that I anticipate the impact being a little bit less than the informational materials showed, but that's simply because the assessed values went up a little bit higher, and so I think that's good news. And then that is on average. So as I've said before, you're going to have people that will pay more and people that will pay less, and that probably will correlate with the different taxing jurisdictions that you're part of. Again, our school district has 10 different taxing jurisdictions, all doing different things, but on average, we'll be close to the numbers that are in the informational materials, but a little bit lower probably. So that said, tax rates are here. The referendum, I'm going to go on to the next one here, because we talked a little bit about what makes up the number. And again, we're showing the audited numbers in the first two columns, and then the original budget without the referendum. And then the final column to the right is the levy with the referendum passing. I want to show, just point out a couple things that are happening with this. The general fund, you can see that the increase in the levy there is about that $5.4 million. That's the difference between the referendum passing and not passing. You can see the referendum debt service is changing though. With the original budget, we do prepay some debt service, and that's that $9 million number that's there. If the referendum does pass, then we kind of lower that prepayment of debt service. And so that offsets about $3 million associated with the increase. So you'll see that the final debt levy is actually only about $2.5 million, a little bit less, actually $2.4 million different with the referendum passing to not passing. So I wanted to share that with you and try to explain it to you, so that if there's any questions, that we all kind of understand that. And then we just did some quick percentages. The original budget, the levy is going up about 3.5%, a little bit less than that. And really we're attributing that to new construction, which is in our school district. New taxpayers really is what that is. So we didn't or do not anticipate property taxes going up much, again, on average, for the school district if the referendum doesn't pass. Basically what people paid last year for school property taxes should be fairly similar, maybe a slight increase, but fairly similar to what they paid in the past. Obviously it would go up a little bit more if the levy does pass. The referendum does pass. So with that, I will see if there's any questions.
All right, anyone have any questions or comments on the tax levy discussion with Andy? Go ahead, Tim.
I just want to make one clarification, Andy, and you've said it before, some will pay more and some will pay less.
Yep, these are averages.
It's important to realize that everyone will pay more. Some will just pay less more.
Correct.
And some will pay more. But everyone will pay more. That's really important for me to clarify.
That's a good clarification.
Because otherwise, people think maybe I'm in the less.
Right.
It's just less, more. Okay. I know it's an odd clarification, but it's important.
And I think, that's what points to how confusing school finance is. It's not like a budget you have at home where you know exactly what money's coming into one account and going out another, and you have your investments or whatever. This is why it's very confusing, because also when we're putting things out there are all these variables, right? It based on where you live and what municipality, right? We're trying to do easy calculations for people. That's why we did cost per 100, because people have different values of homes. And so we're trying to make something that is super complex a little bit easier for people to understand. And so then you also put in the tax levy where, these are pretty impressive numbers when you think about, even with the referendum, the tax levy will be less than last year.
The tax levy rate, yep.
Yes. So, you know, it's just, there's a lot of things. And so you really have to dive deep into it. And that's why we have a 20-plus year veteran that's helping us work through all this stuff, because it's very, very complicated. So appreciate the question. Tim, any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Mary.
So Andy, I think I heard you say that the numbers that are in the informational flyer that the school district sent out are not quite.
They were estimates from August,
Right.
so they're a little bit higher than what if I were to calculate them today, they'd be a little bit lower.
What's a little bit?
I knew I shouldn't have said anything.
You know Mary is listening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Tim.
Instead of, for instance, $98, I would say closer to 90.
Okay. All right. And I won't hold you to that. Don't
Thank
worry.
you.
I just wanted to get a sense of it.
And again, these are averages, and as Tim said.
Right. A little less, more.
Yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Leslie.
So can you talk me through, and I think I'm remembering correctly, but I want to double check. So on the referendum debt service fund, the difference of that 3 million that we're talking about
Yeah.
is we were looking at trying to pay that down a
Prepay
little bit
it.
more heavy if we don't pass the referendum, and we don't necessarily need to do that as quickly.
Correct.
So
Then-
that because we have a more steady stream of income.
Correct. We're
Okay.
trying to basically stabilize
I just
the
wanted to
levy.
verify that I had remembered that correctly. Thank you
Yep.
so much.
Go ahead, Mary.
Sorry, I have one other question that came to my mind. So I know I've asked you before to approximate how much of the referendum money would be going to salary and benefits
Yeah.
to pay. So, and I know that changes based on all of the different complexities that that you presented tonight. Do you have a rough estimate?
Yeah, a community member asked me that a while ago, and I kind of said, well, at least 80%. And really, when I started thinking about it, we're probably actually closer to 95%. We do have some money in there associated with energy costs, $250,000 for heating costs, natural gas costs, and $250,000 for related to diesel fuel that will pay our transportation carriers. But other than that, it's basically salaries and benefits.
Just to piggyback on that, where do we classify, so as we talk about bus contractors, is everything associated with that contract in that services line item, or how are we?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So when we were trying to calculate salaries and benefits, we did include the transportation component to that because we kept talking about our bus drivers, and they are actually characterized as a 300 level object, which is a purchase service. In addition, we have cleaning services in our buildings, and we actually kind of included them as well in our salaries and benefits area when we were trying to figure out the percentage at that 80%.
Yeah. So I think, to Mary's point, that all of these things live in different places when we talk about the broad bucket of educators. We are talking about teachers and paras and food service and bus contractors, but they all don't live in the same place in the budget. Right. And so, as people are doing calculations or as we're looking at that, those live and reside in different areas of the budget. So I want to make sure people are clear on that. Okay. Another complexity. Go ahead, Tim.
And I know we've talked about this before as well, but I had somebody ask me about it again today. They asked me about the property that we purchased a few years ago on the edge of town, and couldn't we just sell that property and take care of this? Remember, it's important to remember, first of all, that comes from a different budget. That's a capital budget, not an operating budget. Very important to understand that. Secondly, it's important to understand that we spent about $2 million on that property for over 100 acres, which is about $20,000 an acre. When it comes time to build another school, we will easily pay 5, if not 10 times that for land. And there's no place that we could come up with 100 acres of land that could support multiple facilities. And so I still am strongly in favor of owning that land. We will use it sometime, and it would cover less than 40% of this 1 year shortfall. So it's like cashing in the equity on your house to pay for your groceries. It's a bad idea. So still well spent money and not something I would change my mind on to cover this shortfall.
Do you have anything to add to that, Andy?
No, just to quickly explain the motions, if you
Yes.
would. So we do, again, have multiple motions here because the timing of this is very crucial. The referendum is obviously on November 8th. We have to certify these levies to the municipalities by November 10th. So that's why we're asking for you to approve both levies, and then for the clerk to be able to authorize basically to certify which one, based on the referendum results, we forward to the municipalities. So are there any questions about that? We have done this once before, and I don't remember when it was, but it was a few years ago. I think it was related to the 2014 referendum, where we were trying to get onto the levy right away. But it was the November referendum was a little bit earlier than November 8th, so we had a little bit more time. This one's pretty tight.
Okay, so any other clarifying questions for Andy before we move to motions?
So with the approved levy that does not go through, that just kind of goes away. It doesn't really
correct.
do anything else.
Right. The clerk, Anna, would just determine which one to authorize us to send to the municipalities.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion being put on the floor that recommends the approval of the first tax levy. So I will make whoever the motion makes that motion read that amount.
I can make the motion to approve a total tax levy of $33,093,824 to yield a deficit budget that we just talked about if the referendum does not pass.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion on that motion? Okay, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Dr. Lakuda?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Okay, moving on to the second motion, if the referendum does pass. So I will entertain someone putting that motion on the floor.
I motion that.
Oh, can you please turn on your mic?
Sorry about that. I motion that we approve a total tax levy of $35,513,824 with the referendum passing.
All right, is there a second to that motion? All right, any further discussion on that motion? Mary, did you have discussion on that motion? Oh, okay, all right, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuda?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Okay, one final motion to approve the Board of Education clerk be given the authority to determine which levy to certify to municipal clerks based on the November 8th, 2022 referendum results, given that we will not have a meeting by the time that needs to be certified. So I will entertain a motion to give Anna that power.
I'll make that motion.
All right, is there a second? Any further discussion? Okay, Katie, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuda?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. All right, thanks, everyone. We do have the original budget passed as presented tonight, and then we do have the tax levy set for our next step. So thank you, Andy, for all that work. Okay, moving on to discussion items. D, committee reports. I will start with Heather, policy.
Our next meeting is November 14th, just prior to this board meeting.
All right, thank you. B, vision steering. Troy.
We have not met in the last month, and I have to apologize to Anna and Tim. I've been meaning to reach out to you directly to discuss our upcoming meeting. We've been trying to schedule something in November, but we just haven't been able to get all of the schedules to work out. So we will hold our regularly scheduled meeting in December, assuming that everybody can make that one. So, and we can talk about that offline. So, but that's all. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Next D2, operational referendum update. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bergstrom to give us some information, then I'll open the floor up to the board members if anyone would like to make any question or make any comments or ask any questions, okay?
Thank you. All of you have heard me do our standard presentation on the referendum many times. So I think what I'd like to do tonight is just get all the way down to the ballot, because the actual question is something that is very important to people. I think it's extraordinarily clear what's being asked. For many people, it will be on the back side of their ballot, but not all municipalities. It really just depends on where you live. And this question will be on the mailer that if it didn't get to your home today, it will be there tomorrow. It's a half-sheet mailer that includes the question and additional information that will help people make an informed decision on November 8th. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to our community members about the referendum and give information, answer their questions. There have been really kind and supportive encounters, even when people didn't necessarily agree that this was the solution that was right for our district. But it just has reminded me how fortunate I am to work here because of the kind of people that we serve. Really kind, good people who believe in education, even if they don't believe that this is the solution. So I think that will be it for me related to the operational referendum update. We have a lot of good things in the hopper, including additional interviews, more parents-teacher conferences to attend. So we are going to keep busy sharing information right up until November 8th.
All right, I'll open the floor to board members. If you want to make any, this is our last board meeting before the referendum vote, so if you want to make any comments, have any questions, or even talk about things that maybe as you've gotten out in the community and talked with people, some things that people may not understand that you want to make sure people understand. So I'll start with Heather.
Thank you. I think this is really great that we're reviewing this. One of the things that I had been hearing in the community, Tim already covered with the land, so thanks for knocking that one out. The other one is why reoccurring. And so I think, you know, we kind of touched upon it last time, and I believe we all went kind of around the table and said, you know, if the legislature comes to the table with dollars that we as a board do not have to utilize the full amount of levy. But I've gotten some interesting questions about why reoccurring, and I just wanted to shed my 2 cents on it, and I don't want to speak for the board, but, you know, it's a darned if we do and darned if we don't situation, because we don't know what the future holds. But I think it would be really difficult to come back in 2 or 3 years and say we need another referendum. Much easier to say, hopefully, that the state legislature has come forth with some funding and not have to keep coming back to the community over and over. So I thought that was worth highlighting. Why the strategy behind and the reasoning why I don't want to speak for the board, but it was unanimous why we went for a reoccurring referendum.
All right, thank you, Heather. Anyone else have any comments or questions? Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, I think one of the comments that we've been hearing is kind of the fact that this is a cumulative referendum that is phased in over 3 years. And so the big picture is the ask from the Board of Education is to exceed revenue limits by 11.4 million in a recurring format, year after year after year. But that is phased in over a 3-year period of time. And so the information that has been shared reflects that 3-year phased in approach. But I think it's important to note that year to year, those are compounding. They're adding, they sum to each other. Because in the end, it's a total of $11.4 million. And if you sum up the 3 years worth of funding that we are going to implement this with, and you also have to add up what we've identified for the cost per $100,000. So I just want to make sure the community is aware of the fact that that the intent here is that this adds year to year, and that the total ask is the 11.4 recurring, but it's phased in 3 years with different amounts estimated by Andy to help understand what that impact is as it's phased in over time. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Yeah, to add on to that point, other districts in Dane County are doing the full amount recurring the first year, and that was deliberate on our part. That was deliberate by the administration and by the board that we wanted to not hit our community with that big of a tax impact in the first year. So that was deliberate on our part to phase in, also knowing that the state could come back into the arena, so we may never get to the 11.4. So I think, that's a really important point that we did that with our taxpayers in mind. So, okay, anyone else? Good? Everyone good? Anna, or Mary, go ahead.
The only other thing that struck me tonight listening to you, Andy, was that the $5.4 million that comes in year one is very close to the 2 or 3 million that we had to transfer out of our operating costs to cover the special ed costs because the state simply is not taking care of their responsibility there either. And so there are so many different ways that this could have been avoided. And it just has been kind of a train wreck coming for years, really since, 2008, 2011. And so my fervent hope is that the state legislature will come back to the table and reinvest in our schools. But until that day, I really feel that we have to take care of our students and our community. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Mary, you just reminded me of something that I want to clarify as well. Because a number of us have talked about this, the state coming back to the arena. It's a very important point to me that if the state comes back and funds $200 per student, and we run the numbers on what that equals, that we will levy $200 per student less. It's an important point. It is not necessarily spelled out in the language. And, but we've been around the horn here, and I haven't heard anybody say any differently, and I have said very specifically, if that money comes in, we back off that amount from the levy, period. It's an important element to me. So, again, I just want to make sure, again, it's on the record. That's how I feel about this.
All right. Thanks, Tim. Anyone else?
Chris, yeah, just one more
Okay.
thing from me. As part of the budget, Andy talked about one of the changes which was due to open enrollment. And, open enrollment has always been, for as long as I can remember, it's been a net positive. I don't want to use, don't like the word revenue generator, but it is a positive impact on our budget when families from surrounding areas choose to bring their children to our district. And I think it just demonstrates that Oregon is a destination district, not only for staff, but for students. And as we see all these other surrounding districts going to referendum, should our district not pass and others do pass, we will be challenged, I think, in that area as well. I think, we continue to have great students and teachers, and that'll continue, regardless of this referendum. But looking across the state, there are a lot of other districts that are doing similar things and trying to overcome the lack of state aid. So just wanted to make that comment.
All right. And so if people do have questions, it's OregonSD.org/referendum. Is that correct? Okay. Or school funding. Sorry, Erica. All right. So if people still have questions, there's a pretty comprehensive FAQ there. All right. Let's move on to the meat part of our agenda, which is e-information items. First is the 7-12 annual goal presentation. So we are looking forward to hearing from our folks in grades 7, 8, and 9, 12. So I will turn it over to Dr. Bergstrom to make the first introductions.
Thank you. And I will actually be turning it over to John Tanner, our Director of Learning and Student Achievement. He will be doing a sort of pre-presentation just to speak for a moment on what to expect. And then we'll be handing it over to Mr. Pliner and Mr. Avalos.
Thank you for that wonderful pre-presentation. And if you guys want the cool mic, you can come over here and do it too. So it's nice. All right, so I will talk directly into this. So good evening. My name is John Tanner. I'm the Director of Learning and Student Achievement, which all of you seated here know, but people online may not. At our last meeting, we shared our 4K through 6th grade data and goals. And tonight we're continuing with our older students, grades 7 through 12, as they continue on through our district to reach their goal of graduating and fulfilling what we have in the Portrait of a Graduate. So as always, we start with our mission and our values. Actually, you got the clicker? Yeah. You want to click that thing? Thank you. So our district mission in part, and you'll see more of it tonight, which that's a little teaser for you, but in part is helping students acquire the skills, knowledge, and attitudes to achieve their individual potential. And we have our 5 values as always there. So this is always what we start with. And these values were developed in cooperation with our community 6 years ago, over 6 years ago. It was a large group that spent a couple days working on this and refining it, and they have really guided what we've done since then through good times and challenging times. So, and it's the mission and vision that drove our work toward developing the Portrait of a Graduate. All right, can you hit the clicker again? Thank you. So our Portrait of a Graduate guides everything we do in those 4 areas of community, character and culture, critical and creative thinking, and competency. So this is the vision of what our graduates should look like as a result of their experiences here that are multifaceted. And it was created through focus groups, open houses, dialogue with our stakeholders, surveys. It was very collaborative over quite a bit of time. It was developed for quite a while. So the visual is symbolic of the leaves that are on a tree that grow over time, and competency is kind of the main one that's sort of at the bottom and supports the rest of them because that's what we're here for. And that's the requirements for graduation in Board Policy 41101. Realizing though, and that's the reason the school district exists, is for graduation and competence and everything. But part of our whole child value means that we pay attention to the other leaves as well. So we grow students who are good community members, who have strong character, who build good culture, and are really skilled at critical and creative thinking to meet the needs of today and tomorrow. So altogether, these are the areas that contribute to a well-rounded graduate. So what you'll see tonight is a little different than last time. It's similar in that we have the same focus areas, but it's different in that it looks different when you implement it in grades 7 through 12 than when you start with our little 4-year-old kindergartners and elementary schools. So OMS and OHS have the same philosophies, but the implementation is different, and especially at the high school level, because student interests and needs can mean a lot of different individualized ways, or ways to individualize learning. So students don't go through the same path. That provides a lot of opportunities for students. It also provides some challenges. So we want to make sure that every student can achieve whatever their goal is, not that we, put out a cookie cutter graduate who's just for one thing. And that's why one of the emphases that you'll see for the high school is college or career ready. We want them to be ready for whatever it is they're going on to. So in order to do that, the data that we look at, the goals that we have, and the tools that we use to collect and analyze the data look different. So there is a shift here. Now, we always have the goal that all of our students make at least 1 year's growth every year. That's just kind of a given. But one of the things I'll point out, which we pointed out last time, but it's really important for people to understand, is that when you want everybody to make 1 year's growth, we also want everyone to be proficient. And if a student isn't at grade level this year and they make 1 year of growth, they're going to remain under a grade level. So for certain students, we say, okay, if you're not proficient at grade level, we want you to make more than 1 year's growth in 1 year. Well, that's challenging. We have to do some things differently to do that because, on average, people are average. We have to do something different. So what you'll notice is that some students need different things in order to succeed and to make that additional growth. And so you'll see that tonight. In that, like last time, we have all school goals, which is that like 1 year of growth in every area every year. But we also have focus goals where every school last time and this time has identified one demographic group, defined different ways by each school that they are going to focus on. So in addition to the 1 year's growth every year, each school has the focus goal for that specific group of students. And depending on the students, we have different metrics to measure their proficiency. So specific data points are collected regarding their proficiency, and we use different tools. So some of the things you'll see tonight, for example, the high school has Redefining Ready as a different tool that's research-based, that's being adopted to look at what components go into being able to graduate successfully. At the middle school, our focus group, I won't steal Jorge's thunder, but anyway, we're looking at specific groups of students because as we move that group of students up, it moves all students up, it moves our average up. And the tools that we use are beneficial to everyone, which is really important. So the three things to notice tonight as you're looking at this and maybe comparing it in your minds to what you remember from our 4K6 presentation is first, that I've said this a few times because it's important. In addition to the goal for all students to achieve at least 1 year's growth each year, each school has a focus goal for a specific group of students that we're individualizing. We're personalizing that instruction to that group of students to meet their specific needs, which goes to the board's long-standing commitment to individualized, student-centered learning. Number two is that I want you to notice the specific data points that are collected regarding the proficiency of these groups and how we use different data tools and different strategies than the elementary schools do, just because things are different for different age-appropriate groups, and we have to differentiate more. Third, I'd like you to notice how we have specific research-based strategies, different at the middle school than all the other schools, different at the high school than all the other schools, that are used to support students who are the target of our focus goals. So those are basically the three things. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jorge Avalos, who is our principal of Oregon Middle School.
Hello, everyone.
You have to get really close to that microphone.
1, 2, testing. Can you hear me? All right. Well, I'm the newly minted principal at Oregon Middle School. My name is Jorge Avalos, and I just want to say thank you to the board for the opportunity to be here in front of you, but also thank you to the Oregon community. Everyone has been very welcoming for me, and I'm very happy to be here. Today's presentation, I'm going to start with our mission statement. And something interesting that I've noticed in our mission statement are that there are 3 little dots there, and that suggests that there's something left unsaid. And I want to share with you guys what that is. If you look at the slides, there are 2 components that I want to highlight today, specifically the part that says to contribute to a changing society. And something interesting is that our students will be inheriting one of the most diverse globalized societies, and I love that that's also part of our mission statement that is after those 3 dots, and also to be receptive to learning as a lifelong process. So our teachers are excellent at creating professional development opportunities catered to themselves, and you'll see a little bit of that on October 27, where our students will be at home resting. Our teachers will be here working in the morning at the building level from 8 to 11, and then in the afternoon they'll be working across the district to support student growth. I also wanted to share the Spanish component of that, as I noticed that the biggest diverse group that we have in Oregon is our Hispanic and Latino population, and I wanted to foreshadow the reason why we chose that group in this presentation. And the mission statement in Spanish reads, ayudando a los estudiantes a adquirir las habilidades, la sabiduría, actitudes necesarias para alcanzar su potencial individual y contribuir a una sociedad cambiante y la aceptación de aprendizaje de por vida. And like Mr. Tanner was saying, everything that we do in our theory of action is reflected on all of the work that went into the Portrait of a Graduate. So all of the 4 components that you see in Portrait of a Graduate will be presented in our theory of action plan today. But before we do that, we want to ask ourselves, why do we create a theory of action? And I just wanted to make a reference to the American with Disabilities Act that was created in the 90s. And something interesting that I love about this visual is that the reason for using the curb cut effect is when people with disabilities had these curb cuts, it not only benefited them, it benefited other people. For example, the mother with a stroller, you can use that curb cut in order to go easily from one area to another during the sidewalks. You also have the Amazon guy passing with packages. It's easier for you to develop packages, or someone on a skateboard, someone on a bicycle. So the reason why I create a theory of action is because we want to make something better for people who are excluded or formerly marginalized, can actually make it better for everyone. And that's something that we're using. You'll hear the curb cut effect, and that's our intentionality with our focus group as well. And then this is a visual that I wanted to show you because this is all the work we're doing this year. This is called a continuous improvement cycle, and we start with analyzing data. And by the end of this year, every one of those components that you see up there is what we're going to be working on throughout the year, right? So we're analyzing the data, we're creating our action plan, we're planning the work, we're implementing the strategies, we are supporting staff learning, we're evaluating to see how we're doing, and then we're going to reflect and adjust, make modifications as necessary, but we're also going to celebrate our successes because there's a lot of work that's going to be put into this theory of action plan this year and into the next year as well. So we talk about 3 different points of data to inform our decision making. We talk about satellite data, we talk about map data, and we talk about street data, but I just wanted to show you an example of what each one of these looks like when we look at decision making process for ourselves. I also like the symbol of having a jar, and then satellite data is kind of like the big rocks, right? There's still space in that jar for you to fill it in with other things. Our map data are the pebbles they can still use to fill up the jar. And lastly, our satellite data, our street data are the sand that you can put in a jar. And that also gives us a better perspective of what decisions we're making on behalf of our students, the whole child. And one example that I wanted to show you was satellite data. It's kind of the big picture, and it points us in a general direction, but it's only a snapshot in time. And the reason why we focus on our Latino population this year is because that gives us a greatest N number. We want to have a number greater than 20 because we also want to protect the privacy of our students. And for our Latino population, it's about 42, 43 of our students. And whenever we do interviews and we get to the granular part, we're going to be able to get more information that can support all of our students throughout the year. So that's an example of satellite data. And then we also have map data, which is a little bit more focused direction. And when we just completed our STAR data, that's letting us know what the proficiency levels are for all of our students in 7th and 8th grade. And that's just a visual of the supports that different students will make throughout the year. We also talked about the hearts and minds, right? We have to support our students' emotional well-being as well as their academic well-being. And this is where our street data helps us support our students at the basic needs of a child. They say we have to make sure that we master before we can bloom, right? We have to make sure that we have their basic needs, food, shelter, and other things in order for our students to focus on the academics. And if there's a lot of trauma or other mental health issues, we can't really focus on the academics. So this is where we combine the hearts and the minds into one component. And this is how we got to our theory of action. So the next slide that I'm going to show you is where we're putting all of these components and we're working on these throughout the school year. For the month of September and October, we wanted to focus on building safety and also the social emotional learning of our students. We're about to change into the instructional practice, and for us, we wanted to choose a universal strategy that every student can use in 7th and 8th grade that they can use whenever they move on to high school. And that strategy was annotation, because we want to make sure that students know how to tackle a reading no matter in what class they are in order for them to have a greater understanding and get to that higher level of critical consciousness for all of our students. And it's in our Portrait of a Graduate as well, right? The competency part, but also the creative and innovation part of our students. Portrait of a Graduate allows us to do that, where we can interview students and see what are things that we can do better to support them. We also work with our Positive Behavior Intervention team, PBIS, and we're looking at a school culture and climate. We're working with the PBIS team to track cell phone use because we've noticed that that was a distraction for our students. So part of our theory of action is also to make sure we create data to track cell phone usage in order to reduce behavior issues in the classroom. Family and community engagement. We want to make sure that our students from diverse populations feel safe and comfortable coming into our physical spaces. So we're making an outreach to make sure that we invite the families into the buildings to make sure that they feel welcome and that sense of belonging. And lastly, we're working on staff collaboration professional learning committees, or PLC Plus. We're trying to make sure that our staff are able to work with other staff members in order to make sure that our scope and sequence is up to par and make sure there's alignment in our curriculum as well, whether it's standards or whether it's just what units are covered throughout the year. How does pacing look like from one semester to the other? And this is one example of an anchor chart, and something unique about this is that we want to make sure that we're using the same symbols in any classroom, so whenever the students get to the high school, they know how to mark a text. These are called anchor charts, and this is also research-based, and there's a class at the high school, the Avid classroom, that uses a lot of these best practices. They're meant universally. Any student, whenever I read something, I'm always marking my text. So I want to make sure that every student knows how to use resources, so whenever they get to those higher level classes, whether it's an AP class, whether it's an honors class, or whatever it may be, make sure that we're using symbols that can help them get to a greater understanding of what they're reading. And it takes all of us, right? It's the collective efficacy, whether you're a food service personnel, whether you're an administrative assistant, or whoever you may be, it takes all of our collective efficacy for us to have a well-operating school, especially in 7th and 8th grade, where we have about 640 students in our building. And those are just some pictures of us, the little things in life. The bottom left, it's our admin team. We go around the building, and we always give a birthday card to every student, right? Because it's those special, unique things that you can do. And just seeing that smile on their faces whenever you just, hey, happy birthday, I hope you have a good day. So it's just examples of some of the things that we do at Oregon Middle School to make sure that students have a stronger sense of belonging, and also just to appreciate all the things that our teachers do for our students every single day. And in summary, this is kind of all of the things that we're doing behind the scenes every day. Whenever we have students in the building or whether we don't have students in the building, our teachers are working hard for Oregon. And I just want to give a shout out to the infographic that our elementary principals made last year, because I love the visual of people are in different stages in life. Some people might need more support, or some people need more personalized support based on their needs, whether you're at proficiency level, you're at an advanced level, or you're below proficiency. We're here to support all children, and that's a whole child emphasis that I love Oregon has. So it's just I wanted to reshare this because I love the representation that was here last time the elementary principals presented. And lastly, our goal is to make sure that we have a 5% increase in proficiency level for all of our students, but also when we talk about closing those gaps, and I talked about the pebbles, the rocks, and the sand, we also want to make sure that we close gaps in our education, and our goal is to increase 10% our literacy goal for our focus group, which is our Latinx population, and we also want to make sure that we have a 5% interest in our numeracy goal for all of our students to meet that proficiency level, and 10% for our focus group, which is our Latinx population, in order to close those gaps in education, with the emphasis of the curb cut effect, right? If we can support formally marginalized students, it's actually helping all of us because we're using universal instructional practices that support all kids. And the last thing I wanted to share as evidence that I'm not making this up is we had a fire drill where we had our students go outside. We're required to do a fire drill by the state every month. And then I got this amazing letter from my grandmother talking about our students who were cheering on her grandson when he was trying to shoot a bottle rocket from his driveway, right? So this is the letter that I got from the grandmother, and I'm going to read it to you. It says, "Dear Mr. Avalos, I live right across the street from OMS. My 3-year-old grandson was outside playing with the toy rocket during the fire drill this morning. Many of your students noticed his play and lovingly engaged with him, shouting, "Rocket, rocket, rocket." Each time Johnny launched his rocket, all of the kids cheered and clapped. I'm writing to tell you how impressed I am with your kiddos. They all noticed the little boy at play and joined right in. This encouragement absolutely made Johnny's day. I'm very proud of each OMS student who showed us all how a small act of kindness can make a big impact on another child's life. Kind regards, Teresa Doyle. And there's a video. I don't know if we have time for the video or we'll be able to see it.
Here, Johnny, do another one. All right, put it on there.
All right, one more time.
All right, stop on it.
Thank you. Before I pass it to Jim, what questions do you have?
That's a perfect metaphor for OMS right there. Boom. Yes, thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Tanner. He is passing around a couple of items that in a moment, let's see where I'm at. There I go. All right. You're helping me out. You know, I have in my day-to-day, I have the opportunity to meet kids in a variety of settings, and often the very first thing that I ask kids, regardless of the context, is, what is it that you want to do after high school? To me, that is such an important, as I look at my juniors over here, they're representing 1,269 students, but many of them are on completely different paths than these two wonderful students. I don't know that I've had the opportunity to ask that of Olivia, but Peyton, you and I have had a conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm probably going to be wrong, but I believe it was something like a forensic psychologist, and I wasn't exactly sure what that is, but pretty impressive. But every single kid in our building is on a pathway, and every single kid has a story, and so I really value the approach that this board has taken in embracing the end in mind. And that has always been aligned with the work that we do, and we've tried very explicitly to align the work that we find important in this high school with board vision and policy. And so I'll walk you through just a couple of things because I'm going to get into the goals, and when we get into the goals, you know, it doesn't reflect everything that we do and everything that we value. So it's really important that we just kind of check a couple of those boxes along the way. The intended audience for this is not the school board nor the community. It's not a coffee table piece. It's our staff. And this emerges from work with our leadership team that begins in the spring of the year. We always do a SWOT analysis, really an opportunity for us to think about what we perceive to be the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities for growth, and the threats that exist in our system. And so we try to bring student voice to the table through staff interviewing students and bringing that along with their own lived experience. And if I can walk you through a few pages here of things, we'll center on our goals shortly. That inside cover really focuses, there are a few bullet points. Our staff identified our strengths is, you know, the fact that there are numerous opportunities for students to pursue their interests at the high school. And again, we've got, you know, a variety of interests, and we provide many opportunities for students to pursue those. We've got our staff identified a collaborative culture that's really focused on instruction, that we're supportive, skilled, and empathetic staff that go above and beyond to help learners, and that we have collegial relationships. We identified in that process in the spring, which was April of this last school year, areas for focused work. Really involve student engagement concerns and looking for policies and practices that promote deeper engagement. And as we all know, you know, we're trying to establish normal 2.0. And so with that, that was a high priority that our staff identified. Improving our classroom practices in the area of inclusion, and that's going to be, that is ongoing PD. The 27th, we're going to be engaging in that work as a school. Strengthening our culture so that all students feel valued, supported, respected, and represented. And that is ongoing important work here. And I can tell you we're not there yet, and we need to be. And that's work that, precedes us and will follow us after we've all gone into different challenges. That work needs to continue. And it's incredibly important work here. And it isn't simply one office or one classroom. It's our entire community needs to embrace that important work. And so that is work that our staff identifies as focused work. Focusing on the health, wellness of all staff and students, mental health, emotional health, and physical well-being. And then finally, exploring ways to expand and support staff collaboration in the service of student learning. That little graphic down below, we apply this year to that normal 2.0, as well as what we want for our students and what we want for staff. We want to create a culture of success that is really predicated on high expectations for all, but also high support. That everybody needs to live and work and grow in an environment that expects a lot from them, but also provides them the tools that they need to be successful. That next page the journey begins here. It's the end in mind, and we're gonna come back to this page because that'll be really the majority of the focus for the goal work that I'll discuss with you as we go. And as John said, our goals will look a little different, and they're rooted in some ongoing work that I think I first presented to the board when we were in the PVE cafeteria. How many of you have been on the board that long when we had our board meetings down there? None of you. Okay. I've been here too long. So we'll come back to this page, but really this is the focus of our work really is beginning with the end in mind, centering our focus on students. Flipping the page, we'll reference our Redefining Ready scorecard, which is something that we have done, the last several years. Page 5, really, again, when we talk about being a staff that focuses collaboratively on instructional practice, the instructional core, our whole instructional design is predicated around instructional rounds, which is City and Elmore out of Harvard, and it really is focusing on the instructional core. Every classroom has one thing in common. There are students, there's a teacher, there's curriculum. And the magic happens in the middle of that triangle, which is the kind of tasks that we ask kids to engage in, the deep, high-quality learning experiences, or they could be very low-level, unchallenging learning experiences. And that is the thing that really defines the quality of the intellectual demand that we put upon kids, as well as creating opportunities for them to grow in those 4 areas that you have identified on your leaves. What we want for our kids when they leave us, whether they're going to be forensic psychologists or biologists or mathematicians or they're working, in the trades, is that they're ready for what comes next. And so that classroom learning is simply the vehicle for developing those life skills that our kids need going forward. Are you forwarding me or is that me? What? You're pushing me. No, I don't even know where I'm at now. I'm lost. So, okay, with that, I'll focus in a little tighter on my timeline. Page. Okay, you're correct. I apologize for that. Page. All right, thank you. Page 6. We've had 8 years. This is my 8th year in this district, and we've had a problem of practice and a theory of action. Again, that emerges from City and Elmore and Harvard. And it really is, it is us as a staff collaborating around the data about the lived experience of our students and what our data tells us. And we identify our problem of practice, and then we create a when-then statement so that as we lean in and we develop certain experiences for our students, that there will be outcomes that I think are incredibly well aligned with the portrait of a graduate as it exists. Our PLCs on page 7 that's an articulation of the engine for doing the improvement work that takes manifest in the classroom level. And our PLCs, Mr. David Piavanetti does a lot of work with our instructional coaches at making sure that our PLC teams continue to grow, continue to develop processes, as well as tight areas of focus around reflecting on evidence of student learning, around aligning instruction to learning targets, around developing those rich instructional experiences that live in the instructional core that help create depth and complexity on the learning tasks that kids are engaging in. And so that is an incredibly important piece of our improvement effort here as a district, not at the high school as well. On page 8, again, we'll underscore the importance of equity and excellence here. And we've got the graphic there of our staff t-shirt this year, Hate Has No Home Here. And, we're endeavoring in the very best way that we can on a day-to-day basis to make that a reality. And we're not there yet. I'm inspired by our students' voices. And, as my friend Jorge here said, listening to student voices and student lived experience is the only way that we can move forward in making sure that we are meeting kids where they're at, where their lived experience is informing the work that we do at Oregon High School and within our district. Maggie Zawicki on page 9, that page really came together through our special ed visioning team that will be leading PD on the 27th. And again, outstanding work. We're looking to the place that we get the best returns for student learning is in the regular ed classroom, and creating opportunities where accommodations and modifications are available to all, and where we remove barriers to classroom learning, where kids are learning in step with their peers. And we continue to challenge people appropriately, as well as really create opportunities for students to access higher learning in our advanced and AP courses as well. It's incredibly important work, and our staff is lockstep with that effort as well. The rest of this, there's a few elements that we'll come back and look at a little bit more detail later. I've got a glossary of terms in there, and then there's some data at the end that I think is really important if we have time to touch back on it. I'm going to get back on my slides though. As you see on, from our theory of action, that when statement really ends, I've got it on the slide here. Each and every student will grow as healthy, engaged, independent learner who demonstrates success now and in their future beyond OHS. From page 3, which is that page inside that document that focuses on our highest purpose. The very first sentence on that page is our highest purpose is to prepare students for their futures beyond high school. What else would we be doing here, right? And that journey begins the very first day that freshmen step through our door. And you'll notice when our focus group, as we talk about our redefining ready metrics, really becomes those youngest students, because the quicker that we can get our freshmen in that achieving band as independent learners that are engaging academically, we're going to be better off, and that they're going to sustain those early successes as they continue on through high school. So some of the elements that are not new that really, again, complement that portrait of a graduate. Academic and career planning has been around. It was in 2013, the state passed a mandate that by 2017-18, all districts had to provide students with academic and career planning experiences. And we launched in the pilot phase back in 2013 as a district, and have been working diligently to provide students with kind of that big picture focus, and doing what we can to help students get a glimpse of possibility ahead. When we look at, this is an example from Wednesday from our Panther Connections. Mr. Ashmore coordinates our academic and career planning team, and they focused this week a Panther Connections lesson that really focused on rolling out that portrait of a graduate to 1,269 students. And during that 32-minute lesson, students had the opportunity to hear from other students in a kind of a video panel, as well as our school to career coordinator. I think I had a brief little cameo in there as well, but an opportunity for them to listen to their peers, learn from one another, get into Zello, which is formerly known as Career Cruising. And that's a state-provided tool that really gives kids an opportunity to learn more about their careers and interests, to learn more about courses in their respective high schools that align with those interests, as well as post-secondary educational requirements, earnings, etc. And so as a part of an introductory lesson here in October, we've rolled that out and kind of made those explicit connections for kids as well. That second piece there, I'm back on this slide, Redefining Ready. Redefining Ready was a district, I think it was 214 in Illinois back in 2014. A superintendent down there worked with his staff on figuring out, like, we're really displeased with the idea that there's one way to measure academic progress, that a test that drops from the sky on your students is the one way in which we judge not only districts but individual students and tell them that they are prepared or unprepared for what their futures hold. In that school district, 214, they worked on creating a variety of research-based metrics that then became a part of the AASA, the American Association of School Administrators Redefining Ready project. I've talked a little bit with John and with Leslie too about, you know, the strengths of that model as well as what might be shortcomings. I mean, people created this, and I think as a district, I would love for us to own the ability to expand some of those indicators a bit, because there are a few spots that I think are lacking, to be quite honest with you. I don't see the music and the arts in there quite to the extent that I think would be wonderful for to be present. But this is a tool that the state has grabbed onto, and while I've been presenting since we were last in the PVE cafeteria, CISA 7 became the CISA that created the first cohort, and we were proud to be one of the first 12 districts in the state to jump into cohort 1. I helped present, 3 of us presented to the Minnesota Superintendents Association back in 2021 about redefining Ready in Wisconsin as well. And so it is, if we go a little bit forward in 3 slides, what is redefining Ready? I could take all night. I'm going to do it in 3 slides. Again, the core premise is we all learn in a variety of ways. Our students learn in a variety of ways. They should be able to demonstrate readiness in a variety of ways. So this is a research-based approach that pulls many different educational research studies together to create some indicators that will be useful in helping decide where kids are meeting college-ready indicators and career-ready indicators. So some research highlights, for example, course attendance is 8 times more predictive of success in freshman year than 8th grade test scores are. So that makes perfect sense, right? I mean, this is not incredibly earth-shattering, but kids who attend at a higher rate are more successful here, and that translates to success beyond. Secondly, students who successfully complete Algebra 2 are twice as likely to complete a 4-year degree. Algebra 2 is considered a gateway course in different research studies. Students who have a 2.8 GPA when graduating high school have a 71% likelihood of reaching the American middle class. Students who are engaged in co-curricular activities are more likely to pursue higher education, have a higher profile of academic achievement, and have a greater sense of connectedness and well-being. When we look at, again, community service is connected as well to greater odds of college graduation, and then students who take AP courses or honors level courses are also far more likely to pursue education in the post-secondary environment. So those would be some elements. So the college-ready indicators may be difficult for you to see, but on that left-hand side, college, I'll go down to that second bolded section, which is standardized testing benchmarks. If a student hits all 4 benchmarks on the ACT by the Redefining Ready, they're deemed college ready, okay? Going above it, other academic indicators, a GPA of 2.8 out of a 4.0 and one or more of the following academic indicators. Getting a 3, 4, or 5 on an AP exam or an A, B, or C in an AP course, dual credit English or math, college developmental reading English or math, Alg 2 with an A, B, or C, would all be other indicators that would go along with that. Again, do I think this is an absolutely perfect indication of college readiness? I think there are some more expansive indicators that could be added to this, but I think that the focus on GPA really is about GPA embodies a lot of things, right? Your willingness to do school, to persist, to attend, to engage in the initial learning, to having the executive functioning skills that enables you to be able to perform well on assessments, etc., are all indicated within that aggregate measure of student performance, and in many ways is more predictive of success than a single assessment. On the career ready side, again, students have an identified career pathway and then 2 or more in the other area, 90% attendance, 25 hours of community service, workplace learning, industry credentials, dual credit pathway courses, or being involved in 2 or more co-curriculars. So as we align our goals, again, so much of our priority work, doesn't get measured in this particular way, but we have several goals that we're going to drill down in a little bit using Redefining Ready metrics. So our overall goal is when we look at the class of 2023, utilizing our Redefining Ready metrics, 80% or more of our students in the class of 2023 will demonstrate either college or career readiness, and 60% or more will demonstrate college and career readiness. So would check boxes on both sides of that equation. And when we think about that, the scorecard is more or less of an autopsy when kids cross that stage as graduates, and those are our goals for the class of 2023. How do we ensure that we can get those metrics higher than that for the classes to come? Because ultimately our goal is that every kid leaves us college and career ready. So drilling down a little deeper, our freshmen on track college and career ready goals. Our freshman on track goal, if we can leverage our youngest kids during their most vulnerable transition, we want 80% or more of our 9th grade students to have a GPA of 2.8 or higher across the curriculum by the end of that school year. It's currently 69% school-wide for the 10, 11, and 12. So we really want to set that bar high for our freshmen. We also have established, again, we talk about high expectations and high supports for our kids. We've established a success center, and wonderful Jackie Craker, who now is an admin intern at the middle school, was really involved in helping develop some vision around that center. And I'm really excited to tell you we hired a man named Terrence Weaver. Terry Weaver is joining us. He was at the Richardson School and is a really talented man who is already making a really big splash with the students he's connecting with. And so focusing on our youngest learners, freshmen and sophomore, rolling through those, through that success center and developing plans of success for students who early in our 4.5-week progress reports and our 9-week report cards begin to separate. We've also established, Maggie we've connected with some previous district connections who are really gifted in the area of building reports and data and ad hoc reports and building dashboards with us. So we've established an early warning indicator system that we can use for 1,269 kids to monitor on a week-to-week basis attendance rates, changes in behavior patterns, as well as any failing grades that are moving for kids. And from there, we can identify kids that we need to connect with and get them the support that they need. And so that success center will be really, really important. We'll also lead into that B goal, the on-track goal too. All ninth grade students will meet or exceed that 90% attendance rate that's also connected with career readiness, that research-based indicator. And we had about 85% of our freshman class last year that met that goal. And so, again, those numbers, I think those attendance numbers, our attendance numbers are up from where they were a couple of years ago. And, when we compare that to what's on WiseDash, some of the districts in the state, the statewide averages are still going down. So there's a gap that's open, but yet we all know that our attendance policies and procedures really were lax in the last year because of, the need to have kids attending when they were in good health. And so we really, again, are raising that bar of expectation and then the support that goes along with it. There's research that says the first 30 days of school out of the Chicago School Consortium is predictive of on-time graduation freshman year to your graduating cohort. So we're really focusing in, and our principals in the neighborhoods that we have established with the counselor principal teams are focusing really tightly on those attendance rates and intervening early and often. Part 2. College readiness on track goal. Now, we told you that GPA and regular attendance are really highly predictive and correlated with graduation as well as success beyond high school. But let's also be real, ACT has value as well. It has value in a lot of ways to our kids. And so when kids attain benchmark, when they're able to attain all 4 benchmarks, that places them in a really important, that's a valuable indicator of college readiness. And so we have, as a district, never really, we've done a few lessons in preparedness for our kids. We have never really highly prioritized. We have never really taken instructional time away from class in order to prioritize ACT readiness. And, to a certain extent, I think that is definitely the right decision. And we're not flipping our philosophy upside down. But I think we are doing our kids a disservice and our reputation as a district if we don't focus on doing what we can to prepare our kids to be ready for the level of the intellectual demand that assessment provides for our kids. And so Mr. Tanner and I have been meeting with, some partners that we're going to work with to provide our kids with an ACP day, our seniors, because they don't have to take that test anymore. But our freshmen, sophomores, and juniors are going to get a taste of that demand in the format that they'll be seeing it in, which is a online virtual format. And so, we'll take a little time, but we'll also give our seniors an opportunity to do college visits, community service, career shadows, and some other opportunities as well to help build their profile and their readiness for what is coming. So our goal there is 35% of or more of our juniors will attain benchmark on all 4 subtests of the ACT. Additionally, we'd like 40% of our freshmen and sophomore to attain benchmark on all 4 subtests on the pre-ACT Secure, that practice ACT. And so we'll give our kids an opportunity during a day, most likely in late January or early February. We'll do a day where we prepare our kids for what's going to lie ahead of them in March. And then part 3, our community goals. Again, by the end of the 22-23 school year, we want to see that our high school students report an increase in the area of a sense of belonging. And we use the Panorama Cell survey in order to generate that. We were in about the 50th percentile of high school students surveyed. And, we want at least 50% of our kids to bump up that connection, that they report a greater sense of belonging and connectedness. And that's connected in many ways to our goals. When we look at getting kids involved, I heard, a conversation from our student report about more clubs and activities being up. We're getting all that into our databases so that we can report out on that participation rate, because it's a really important indicator that's tied to those redefining ready metrics, as well as just, giving us a sense for who we have to reach out to. We understand we're never going to get to 100% because there are a lot of our kids that are involved in things that don't fall under our dominion. We've got kids that are working. We've got kids that are involved in gymnastics club activities that travel the country, that are getting the benefit from being connected in that kind of a extracurricular activity that we don't provide. And so we recognize that, but again, we want to see that sense of belonging pop up. And then our final goal 5 there is 66% or more of our students will be involved in co-curricular activities, clubs and activities that'll include athletics clubs and service organizations. In the fall, just athletics alone, 34% of our kids participated. And so, we're halfway there before the winter sports season kicks off. And I know that Brittany said something like over 200 kids are signed up for sports, and she thinks that's going up. And we're rostering our clubs and activities currently, and so we'll be able to get data out relatively soon. So again, there's 2 more slides. High expectations and high support for everybody. We really need to continue focusing on equity in everything we do. And I want that to come through loud and clear, that the focus groups, that data, that early warning report, we can disaggregate our data on a weekly basis and see that areas where we know that we have had gaps or we've had places where we could predict that we would not have, proportional representation in classroom settings or achievement gaps, we need to do our best to lean in and to do everything we can to interrupt that. Also, I guess the work that continues and the work that I think, we are building on is knowing our students is key at every level. I applaud our elementary colleagues who were up here last week. The fact that we're building relationships, which are the safety net in our community in this important work, that the relationships we have with kids and families and our community partners is critical. And so knowing our kids and, knowing our data and specifically where we need to focus in is critical for us to get better and to be better for all of our kids, to monitor our progress religiously and to intervene early. And to capitalize on the talent that we have. We've got amazing educators in this district. I've heard it all come out of your mouths as well, and it is incredibly true on a daily basis. The things that happen at Oregon High School and these other buildings really are truly remarkable, and we share that credit where that credit belongs. We've got an amazing group that are committed to student success. We're going to continue to develop partnerships in our community and open doors for more kids so that they can, have more school-based learning opportunities, more early college learning opportunities as well. And then we want to continue to learn from the kids that leave us. What did your experiences prepare you for when you're out on your next leg of your venture? Pre-COVID, we had in January all the time, we had our alums back for our panels, and they spoke to our seniors the first year, and then we said, why not the juniors? Let's get the juniors involved. And then from there we expanded it because our younger kids were going to benefit from those voices of experience, because let's face it, when you're sitting across from somebody that was in our building, you knew them when you were a 9th grader, and now you're staring at them and they're off in college or in a trade apprenticeship or they've gone to the military. That speaks volumes to our kids about what is just around the corner for them. And so that is what, that's the work that I'm privileged to report to you on behalf of our leadership team and our staff at large. It's, I think, the right work and it's important work. And we look forward to coming back to you with some data as we move forward.
Great, thank you both. What I'd like to do is what we did last time, is give each board member a chance to ask questions, make observations, things that stood out to you. So who would like to go first? Mary, you're making eye contact with me, so you're up.
Okay, so first, thank you both. Really very helpful to understand what's going on in each of the buildings. I love the birthday card idea. That's such a special thing. I'm curious to know, Jim, the Success Center electronic, is it electronic? And I think you mentioned that you can disaggregate it weekly?
So
How
our
does that-
success center is a physical space, and we have
okay.
we have 2 staff members that are assigned there that connect with kids, that tutor kids, that we're setting up a peer tutoring center as well, so that students can come and get direct support on academic work, but they also can get support on the skills that are behind success, which is the executive functioning skills. It's organizing yourself, setting goals, setting timelines. So that's really there's 802 and 804, what used to be computer labs right now are kind of this suite that we've bought some furniture for. We've established a really warm and welcoming vibe, and we've got 2 amazing educators that really care about helping kids. So that's the physical space. So we have an early warning report that we have been able to establish. We know what we want it to do. We don't always have the skills to make our computer databases speak to one another. So knowing somebody who, it's kind of like your best friend is somebody that has a boat, right, or a trailer. Somebody with those skills is like the coolest person. And so Kira Hicks, has done amazing work to help us establish a report that we can monitor changes in performance and attendance and achievement, as well as disaggregating data weekly basis. We get that report.
That's awesome. Thank you.
All right, go ahead, Heather.
Thank you for that. I had just a couple of quick comments and one question. I was glad to hear you mention just on how the inputs were arrived for College Ready and Career Ready, and that there may be some missing factors, because that was one of the questions I was going to ask, was how and why was all of that. So thank you for highlighting that in advance. The second question or comment that I had was, how did we get to the 80% goal for, let's see.
For overall readiness.
Yeah, for overall readiness. And how does that compare? Do you have any sense of how that compares to the other schools that are utilizing the?
Yeah, so we've got our cohort 1 consortium. People are posting their scorecards currently. And so, we've got an incomplete picture of what that looks like. We also have not utilized it until now in a forward-facing fashion. We've used it after the fact to pull together. Now, due to that work with our consultant that I mentioned a minute ago, we can generate that data much easier. It was the product of a week of spreadsheets and comparing data prior. So, we want every single kid to be ready for post-secondary, by every measure. I also know that based on kind of those metrics, now, GPAs don't move in quantum leaps.
Sure.
A kid can go from struggling to a 4.0 in quick terms and see their GPA toward the end of their academic career move only small increments.
Sure.
So, if they didn't pass if they didn't hit all 4 benchmarks, and mathematically they can't hit that 2.8, I can say, well, there's a kid I'm not going to get in the metrics. That doesn't mean, though, that we're not preparing that kid for something.
That's great. And then my last question is maybe for both of you, and I love how you're talking about, bringing alum back to talk to kids earlier and earlier, or looking at the metrics in 9th grade. Is there, I'm sure there is, so maybe you can just explain, what is the bridge from middle school? Because attendance, awareness, and tracking doesn't just start in 9th grade. So what is the preparation from the transition from middle school to, be ready to kind of categorize and analyze this data?
We always welcome any high school student. I know right now we're working to see if we can even have high school students tutor our students, so there's that academic support whenever they're available. Our SEL coach also works at the high school, so anytime there's an opportunity for collaboration between the two, I also mentioned the universal instructional strategy where we're talking about competency, that it's an alignment directly with the high school because they do have the Abbott program, and that's the one that's research based. So there's that component. Our student services teams, whenever for attendance, we do home visits. There's also ways if we have older brothers at the high school, there's also that support where there's a relationship already made. So it's on a case by case basis, but we're always welcome to more collaboration anytime.
You know, and I think there's an incredible growth in maturity as well as just intellectual capacity, you know, over the years in this district. It's amazing. The growth that we see in our kids from, you know, grade 9 to senior year is amazing. Also, we've got an amazing resource in our building, the leadership that our kids are able to provide, and I think the modeling. And so it makes me wonder when you ask that, you know, if we haven't fully tapped, you know, the opportunity not only to tutor, because it's difficult for kids to commit when they've got a full slate of classes. It sounds easier than it is. We do have kids that mentor in other schools. We have peer tutors that spend time in elementary schools and do reading. It's fantastic. I think that we do have an opportunity to model with our juniors and our seniors before they leave to provide kind of some, you know, a glimpse at what high school is going to hold as well as where they think they're headed. I think it would be good for us to explore.
Right, and thank you. The one other comment I'll just make, and then I'll pass it along, is my kids are too little. They're in elementary school, so I have yet to be a parent of a child that's old enough. But I think about, as we talk about as a board, how we bring parents along, and maybe this is happening, so forgive me because I don't have kids in middle school yet, but, you know, something like this, or maybe just a more brief summary of what, as we're preparing not only students but parents to come along, would be really interesting, I think.
Yeah, I do. I think that's important. You know, we've talked, as I said, we would love to be more expansive. We also know that currently this is research based, and, you know, I think we have strong inclinations about, you know, different experiences that kids have here that should be checked. At some point, the state as a whole may adopt Redefining Ready or elements of it as a part of the state report card. And when that happens and how that happens, we won't control all the elements, but I still believe that, you know, if a District 214 in Illinois kind of helped drive the ship on a national level, why can't Oregon?
Troy.
Thank you. So I just have I'll keep it to two questions, the same for both of you. Jorge, you talked about cell phone use and a kind of a change this year, and I've heard at the high school level at OHS that I've heard positive comments from both staff and students on the change to cell phone policy this year. And Jim, I see that there's a write-up in here, so I'm anxious to read it. But could you both maybe just comment on any anecdotal evidence of the change in the environment this year with the policy, the difference in policy?
Yeah, my staff thinks it's amazing. They really do. I don't know what your living rooms look like from time to time, but everybody seems to just be drawn in, right? And we've always had a cell phone policy here, and it didn't change significantly, but the emphasis and the enforcement did this year because we felt that it needed to. And the feedback from staff has been just really very, very positive. It's made the work kind of busy from time to time when we're trying to cash those checks that we wrote around, you know, every time we're going to, if you can't handle it at the classroom level, we're going to be responding. And our kids have been great. They really have. It's important that cell phones don't become more important to us than the other priorities. But if we can check that box and set it aside, then we can work on the stuff that really matters.
I would just say three things. The cell phone tracker has allowed us to also enforce progressive discipline, because we're talking about middle school. So according to the ages, we always give our students the opportunity to redirect, right? And then there's tiers approaches to what that consequence looks like. We also want to use the power of education. We have one-on-one devices. We have to explain why it is not a good idea to use your personal device when we have Chromebooks that the district has invested in. So anything that you can do in school, you can use in your Chromebook. And lastly, education on digital citizenship. You know, there's healthier ways to use a cell phone, but also we know that there's a lot on social media, and we have to be mindful of educating our students on what a good digital citizen is in order for them to not have something that you put on social media stay there and then it doesn't come back. It's out there forever. So the educational component of what does it mean to be a good digital citizen is also part of our educational component that we try to teach our middle schoolers.
Great. My second question is revolving around data. So street data is really a newer term for me. I've learned a little bit about it, but I'd like to learn more. And Jorge, if you mentioned it, I apologize, I may have missed it, but could you give us an example of street data and how that might be used?
Yes, our elementary principals did a really good job. And we talked about getting more to the granular. I gave you the example of the rocks, the pebbles, and the sand. And this is getting to the root of the students taking in the educational component. So we talk about empathy interviews, and part of our process for acquiring empathy interviews is interviewing all 42 of our students in our focus group using the curb cut effect, because we try to find out what are ways that we can continue to engage our students, and that's going to help us reach our goal proficiency levels. So a specific example of street data is having one-on-one conversations like we're having here and getting to the deeper root of what are the things that can help our students be more successful. So we're tying these empathy interviews to our portrait of a graduate to get to a deeper understanding what the needs are, and what better way than ask the students who are actually on the ground, on the streets. I like the street data. I'm from Chicago, so kind of like sometimes culture, fashion, or anything you may be comes from people, normal people in the streets, and that's where that term comes from. We're just kind of getting to the granular and getting specifics and asking the kids in our buildings, what are the needs, what are things that are going well, what are some things that we can improve on, and that's where we get street data.
Great, thank you. Jim, you and I had a conversation, I think it was at parent-teacher conferences, about data and how, and it just making better use of the data. And so I loved what you were saying about building on redefining readiness and making that more of our own. So I don't know if I really have a question here other than to say that I fully support that idea. And if there's anything that we as a board could do, we'd like to hear more. I think I can't speak for everybody, but it's something that maybe we could work through the visioning committee. It seems to me, as I've reflected on our last conversation, it just seems to me like this could be an internship project for a data scientist or something that we could really engage and build on that. So that's my comment. But thank you both for the great presentation.
Just to piggyback on that, I think as we talk about 41101 and redefining ready, that I think those are related. And as we move forward with the vision committee, and that's going to be in your lap, is really looking at those things together in terms of what are we, is that our opportunity to reimagine 41101 potentially? I mean, so it's just interesting to have those conversations together, I think. And they may not be the same, but I'm just saying, planting that idea of looking at those two things. Tim, would you like to go next?
On top of what everybody has said so far, I gathered up 3 things that really struck me. I think we've, for a long time, have done a great job of differentiating education in this district. For the individual, at a street level, differentiating the method or, how it's done. I think we've done such a great job, but what really struck me this time was making sure we're clear on what's keeping from education from happening. And they're the typical things, the typical but important things: food, shelter, those barriers like language and cultural barriers that can keep kids from learning. But this whole issue about cell phone use has been growing and growing. And knowing that we're doing something with that data, that we're gathering that data, and responding to it is really important. Same thing with attendance. We've always known if you don't show up, you're not going to learn anything. And understanding, you know, at what level does attendance make a difference? It begged the question, do we have an attendance problem? Jim, I'm going to ask you, do we have an attendance problem?
For most kids, no, right?
Right.
We as we have a far less of an attendance problem than what you know, you'd see at the state level when you take a look. I'd say though that the boots on the ground, when I look at my colleagues over here, you know, it is at the root, the attendance issue that inhibits learning for a lot of kids, you know, is both causal as well as a symptom of other things in kids' lives that we have to kind of get to the heart of. You know, why is it that kids are unable to be here on a regular basis is the question. So, you know, a trip to truancy court sometimes is the answer, but sometimes there's a whole lot of other answers that we have to explore. So, you know, I would not sit in front of you and say no, but I'd sit in front of you and say, you know, our attendance looks very similar to high-achieving schools in the conference.
Great. The other thing is differentiating between physical attendance and mental attendance. And that gets back to that cell phone use. I really believe. You can be physically there, but you can be far from mentally there. And so I appreciate the fact that we are measuring that and addressing it appropriately. So that's number one. Secondly, the power of this composite indicator. Test scores aren't it. They're important, but they're not all of it. And I appreciate that perspective because I was not a great test taker. And I like to think I made up for it in different ways. And lastly, high expectations, high support. I think high expectations, we all know that kids, young adults, and full-grown adults rise to the level of our expectations. And so we're counting on you to set that expectation high. And we're hoping that, you know, our community is doing the same thing. So those are the three really the things that grab me. So thank you for all you're doing in both of your schools.
Thanks, Tim. Anna, you're up next.
Great. This was really wonderful information. I really enjoyed both presentations. There's some highlights for me really were from the first presentation, really that curb cut effect analogy. What a perfect way to help, you know, inform how making things better for a marginalized group makes it better for everyone. I loved that image. I loved that way of explaining it, and just it was just the perfect analogy. So thank you for kicking this off with that. What an awesome way to start to frame kind of that, the importance of that work and how it benefits and lifts everyone in the schools. I just loved that. So thank you. The other thing I really picked up on and appreciated was the focus from Jim on knowing our students and connecting with those students. And I think that kind of gets at that neighborhood model where we've got more adults engaged with individual students and talking about that academic and career planning and thinking about those things early on to set the stage for what's the value of this education for me and my future and what that might mean, and knowing how our kids think and what is important to them and what they value, and bringing that through how we know our kids and our students. And I just think that that is such an important piece of the work that's happening in our schools that keeps our kids engaged, keeps them interested in the learning and understanding how that's going to value them, as well as making those relationships with the folks that are helping them get to those points. So I really appreciate that and all the tremendous work that's being done in those areas. And those really were the highlights for me. So thanks for that excellent work.
Thanks, Anna. Leslie, you're up.
Okay, I have a couple of things. First, I have a question. Ms. Heitz, do you think it would be possible to give the board the slides from this week? Because not being able to be here last time, really, really appreciated that. And I've actually gone back and looked at it and taken some more thing. And last time's slide actually has something on the street data. And it talks about, there's actually a book called Street Data available out there. It's on my now on my reading list because of last time. So I just want to let you know about that. And then let's see. For Mr. Avalos, you are focusing on the Latinx population to help raise everyone up, and I think that that's awesome. But I'm wondering if you have been able to figure out exactly where is the problem there? Is it a language barrier? Is it home solutions? Because you did talk about home supports and things like that, or is it a mix? Or what are you seeing?
We will start completing our empathy interviews after we go through the instructional practice. Okay. So that's to be announced. So we have to set up interviews with all 42 of our students, and that data is what's going to inform our decision making on what are the reasons why there might not be engagement. Is it a home? Are there things within our control or things out of our control? So that's what we have to have that data, and we have to have those 42 interviews to determine the reasons why a student may be engaged or may not be. There might be outside forces, or there may be forces within our control, and that's what we're here to support them.
Perfect. I'm glad that you are pursuing that data. And then I do want to say thank you for, and this is across the board to administrators and teachers that are actually going to the home supports and seeing. I didn't grow up here in Oregon. I grew up in a different state. And I didn't have the home supports. And so I did struggle through school. And it wasn't until I was 24 that I felt like I was ready to go back to college because I didn't have those supports at the time. So I really, really appreciate that all of our administrators and our teachers that are trying to catch those kids that don't have that support and give them that net. So really thank you very much for that. I really appreciate that. Oh, and then I guess along the same lines of that, and this is, again, I said it kind of over the phone last time, but I want to say this to all of our administrators, and this has really kind of hit me hard with some of the comments, negative comments towards the referendum, and I think at least a few of them had to do with, you know, where the money was going to go to, and not wanting to give it to administrators. But I want to tell you, and I want to make sure the community hears this, that volunteering, so I have a son who graduated in 2016 from OHS, but then I also have 3 little ones that are at FES right now. And volunteering in the schools in the last several years, I have seen so many administrators help out in classrooms, help out with troubled students, and being able to catch them, spend time in lunchroom duty, spend time on recess duty, spend time anywhere they needed to. So our administrators in this district are absolutely amazing. They don't just sit in an office and go through data. They do that on the time they don't have those kids there. And so I just want to say thank you all across the board to all of you. And I've seen our teachers catch each other and help each other in teams. And I just want to, it really, really touches me. So thank you guys.
Thanks, Leslie. I just have a couple things. One, you know, I really appreciate, Jorge, your new look at our mission statement and really kind of catching us that we're cutting it off. And I think that's really important as we look at our materials that we add the next 2 sentences for our mission statement, because that's where we've grown with Portrait of a Graduate. And so I really appreciate that new look, that the next 2 pieces of our mission statement are where we need to go, because that's more of the whole child emphasis and our impact on the world. So I really love that. I love the data. I really think it's important. I missed that about what we've missed as a board over the last couple of years, not having those conversations. So I really value these presentations we've had, and that having you come back at the end of the school year or in the summer so we can really see what has worked well, what hasn't worked well, what you've learned. And so I appreciate that. My last question is, and I'm going to try and verbalize this so you understand. You know, as we look at our community part of Portrait of a Graduate, I think a lot of times we think about what are our kids going out in the community and doing in terms of, you know, community service. And as I look at some of our behavior issues, that we talk a lot about what are our teachers doing in our schools, or what are our administration doing, and how are we helping our kids. But I want to ask you the question about kids leading kids. right? So a lot of things that happen behaviorally are not happening in a classroom. They're happening in the hall, they're happening in other areas. And I'm not talking about kids that are captains of basketball teams or president of the student council. How are you focusing on or thinking about building leaders in your schools so that we have kids, when people aren't looking, that situation's happening and they're raising the culture and the community of the school? So I guess my question is, how are you helping kids learn leadership skills, soft skills, so because that's such an important piece of community and connection at school and feeling like you belong or feel like people care about you, and it's not your own educational experience, it's about having somebody else that you are in class with, them have a really good educational experience. So that's long-winded, but I want to hear, like, where does that focus come in of building leadership skills among kids, that they care about other kids?
Well, let's see. We've got any opportunity that we have to have students be a voice for change. Mr. Ashmore runs our Pride Crew, and our Pride Crew is engaged with freshman advisories, and so those are seniors and some juniors that are really leaning in and trying to teach our kids those pride values, as well as give them a glimpse of what it means to be a Panther, what it means to, when you come into the high school environment, and you're a 14-year-old kid, you begin to look toward the older kids to kind of set the tone. And I think in general, Brad's done a fantastic job at really engaging kids to be a part of that transition from from our freshman orientation, where we've got, kids that are really running sessions, all the way through those weekly sessions with our advisories, I think are outstanding. I know that Brittany Spencer Grant has done a bunch of leadership development through our athletic programs. She helped host our conference sportsmanship summit, and from there we had a team of Panthers that really were elected by their teams to be representatives, and then to bring those lessons back to their respective clubs is a piece of it. I think that we've got kids through their clubs and activities and service organizations that are developing amazing leadership skills, and we're trying to do our best to put that on stage for everyone here.
Thank you for that question. I think proactive visibility, you talked about those in-between spaces. Our job is to make sure we keep all of our students safe in the classroom, but also in those in-between spaces where we're giving our middle schoolers more freedoms to go from point A to point B, so when they get to the high school and later on they have those skills. Human connection, I have about 11,000 steps, so you're right, I don't sit in my office during the day. I check on that after everyone goes home. That's when I get to go in my computer and try to see what are some things that we need to work on, and just being visible in the hallways. I got 11,000 steps and counting today, just being in the building, and that's every day, making those human connections, because that's telling a student when we meet them at the bus, I see you, I'm glad that you're here. And the second the student walks through our door, that means that they want to be there. So it's us modeling. As administrators, we have a lot of responsibility, and I try to be the best model that I can be for all of our students. Our affinity groups are starting to meet. That's a good way for us to create safe spaces where we can have conversations about what does that look like. Our admin intern does a Panther Press, where I do a weekly communication of what are some behaviors that I want to see, whether it's in the cafeteria, whether it's in the hallways. Being a speed bump in the halls and kind of telling kids slow down, right? You can hurt someone. So there are a lot of components. There's also connections every day for about 22 to 24 minutes where there's lessons through Character Strong and Second Step, where we model what does it look like to be a social being, right? After COVID, a lot of our students were lacking on those social skills, and for the next 2 years, we're calibrating to make sure that we know what does proper behavior look like in different spaces in the building. So it's a combination of everything, and that's why I had all of my staff there, because it's the collective efficacy of everyone from our custodian to our bus driver to model what good practices look like in those in-between spaces.
I'd also kick myself if I didn't mention our peer tutor program, our classroom cadets, as well as our math TAs that also are really important modeling.
And I guess my final question is having to do with SEL. You've got a group of students, one of the first groups of students that have started SEL at a younger age, right? We've had kids that graduated, but they didn't have that earlier. And so I guess my question is, are you seeing benefits of earlier social emotional learning, or is it also a function as they age into a different level of development, that those are newer skills associated with social emotional learning that they need to learn? So I guess is what we're teaching younger translating to older, or are they changing and the environment's changing and we don't see as much of impact? I guess I just kind of want to know what you're seeing in that realm.
Yeah, I think that, we've got, we're beginning to collect some data to be able to measure the efficacy of our SEL work, as well as to identify areas that we need to continue to focus on. We know that, our kids have never been better. You heard, was it 2 years ago or a year and a half ago when we had the Dane County Youth Assessment data, how our kids wear their seatbelts, they are engaging in less risky behaviors, they drink less, they use drugs at a lower rate, there's less risky teen sexual activity, lower rates of pregnancy, lower smoking. But at the same time, our kids are more stressed and anxious than any other generation. And that is not an Oregon high school phenomenon. That is something that, that's one of the contributing factors to us all really wanting to focus on cell phones and social media and the impact. Our kids in many ways they're like a part of a huge experiment, and there really is no control group, right? And so it's difficult for me to isolate to say, thank goodness that we're seeing this impact. I know that our kids need to focus on, on their own mindfulness and being able to engage in activities that reduce their own stress levels, and being able to manage and knowing how to get help and knowing where to go if they need support. To me, those are just things that we can't live without currently, and we believe in the importance of them. And I think that when we identified as my staff in that SWOT analysis on the inside cover, it was the well-being of not only students but staff, right? Because we're in this is an important vocation. We're kind of developing the people that are going to take care of us, the generations that are going to take care of us moving forward. And, they're subject to things that we never had to face as kids. And so I think it's the right work. It's important work. And I guess the data is going to be relevant sometime in the near future.
I'll be brief. I think a lot of it builds upon the elementary level. So as I hear the elementary principals talk about what these lessons look like, there's also healthy relationships. When you start getting into middle school, high school, that's another component. So we try to model what does a healthy relationship mean between two students. So there's some things that add up, but there are some things as our students are going through different changes in their bodies that we have to have different conversations based on the appropriate age group.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, I will turn it over to Dr. Bergstrom for the last word for you gentlemen.
Thank you. I just want to, thank you. Poor Katie, she knows exactly. I just make my clicker hand motion and she knows just what I'm talking about. That comes from working together 50 some hours a week, right, Katie? Okay, thank you. Yep. Okay, I just want to make a point here with what Mr. Avalos and Mr. Planner just said. If you take a look at our visioning and strategic planning framework, where we have the mission and the values, the development of the portrait of a graduate, and then our board's 3-year priorities. If you look at the SWOT analysis that was done by the high school staff, or you take a look at any of the goals or areas of focus for either one of the schools, and then you include K-6 in there too, and you'll see that everything that each of the schools is talking about as far as what is important for our students, what is important for our staff in service of our students, it's all well aligned. Everything the board has told us is important. That's exactly what we are focusing on because it is based in research regarding what is important. It's not just a bunch of things that were generated because they sounded good. It's what educational research is telling us is worthy of our time and attention. And I think what we saw tonight is an excellent exemplification of that. Our schools, all the way through, know what is worthy of our time and attention and what will have the greatest impact on our students. And that's what you see carried out from 4K all the way on through graduation.
Thank you both. We appreciate your time and thank you for choosing the Oregon School District. All right, we are back over to Dr. Bergstrom for our final 3 parts of the information items.
Well, actually, I think that that was what I just said was the visioning and strategic planning, and what you just listened to is teaching and learning. So I think we're going to get to the superintendent's report and wind this up. And that is many thanks to our Prairie View teachers and administration who did so many things to make the last month work because of how challenging it was to have to be in different classrooms, all of 3rd grade, half of 4th grade. Many of the people who remained in the building were doubled, tripled, quadrupled up so that they're really only using half the building. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. Last week, our 3rd grade students moved back into their classrooms, and there was a lot of home sweet home discussions that happened in 3rd grade. And then on Wednesday, our 2 4th grade classrooms are moving back, and a couple of other classrooms are opening up. And that is despite the fact that there was a second water incident that had to do with the sump pump that wasn't functioning properly. So Prairie View has been through the ringer, and it has showed everybody is just another example of how incredibly dedicated the staff is and how resilient roll with the punches the kids are. You know, they were great. And also many thanks to Netherwood for opening up their rooms and their hearts to having more students in their building, and it went really, really well considering how challenging the whole thing was. And there we go. It gets back to the people who have been leading these presentations, including our 4K coordinator, Lindsay Engelhardt. We really have a wonderful team. They're people who, their love for kids shines through. Every time they present, every time we're in a meeting talking about students, it's positive, strength-based language about our students because that's what they feel in their hearts. And I couldn't be more proud to work with them. And speaking of pride, our soccer team, our boys soccer team won the regional championship Saturday night. So that was quite the feat, and they're on for sectionals, I think, Thursday night. So next up in the race to state. Oh, and we also have one of our high school students who's going to state for cross country. So Dasha is qualified for her 4th career cross country meet. So she's a senior who's going for her 4th time. So congratulations, Dasha. And then our football team, they ended a great season on Friday night. So that's terrific that they were in the playoffs in that way, and congratulations to them. And volleyball just finished their season Saturday night at the regional game, and they have been exceptional in their strength and in how much fun they have together. And speaking of fun, the Great Apple Crunch took place this last couple of weeks, and the kids try a lot of different foods through the really creative work of Sarah Tomasevich and her group, but also through our Farm to School
AmeriCorps volunteers. They're in charge of that too. So the kids get to taste a lot of really fun things, but I'd be willing to wager that the Great Apple Crunch is their favorite. Special guest reader at Prairie View. You see Principal Goltz reading to Miss Jansen's third grade class. And this is an example of the fact that our principals, they do put in the steps on their pedometers. They're around their buildings all day, all the time. Oh, and speaking of guest speakers, Ms. Viola Swamp was a substitute at Netherwood. And you can see she is reading a book in which she is featured to our kindergarten students who were so excited and hope that Miss Swamp comes back repeatedly. Oh, and speaking of kindergarten, this was Brooklyn's kindergarten drive-in movie. They make cars and enjoy a celebratory movie. So there's a lot of learning that goes into the making of those cards. I remember doing the same thing with my grandma back in the day. And this one, I'm going to have to look what the theme park activity at Brooklyn is, because that just looks fun as can be. Students worked on their problem-solving skills, our first graders, with a theme park activity. Each student individually designed their rides and are working with partners to name their rides and the theme park in general. And you have scooter fun at FES. So this one is, as you can see, we have our kids scooting around the gym on their little rolly scooters, which were my children's favorites when I brought them to school on the weekends so that I could work and they could roll around on scooters. It was great. Oh yes, and Rome Corners, the owl pellet investigation. This is a very popular thing with our 5th grade students. This is Miss Kramer's class. And then the middle school students put on Shrek Junior. They had 3 performances over the weekend. Congratulations to them. And look at the costumes they look delightful, intense. They look like real high-end production costumes. So that is great. And then our middle school orchestra, they are performing, well, they had a concert recently, but I'll also say they are performing at the State Music Convention on Friday. So they've got a couple of exciting things coming up. They're preparing, they're ready, and there will be many of us there to cheer them on. High school had their school to career day a school to career opportunity with one of their lunch and learns. So this is kind of fun. Subway had a hiring table and they had wrap a sub challenge. So they saw how fast a sub could be wrapped. And guess what? The winner was a current Subway employee at 6 seconds.
Rigged. It's rigged.
Yeah. Beehive Homes were there to speak with our students about healthcare, food service, and management. Mariposa was there to talk about childcare and business ownership. And Badger Bus came to speak to students about being vehicle mechanics. So this is just during the lunch period that students can stop by and investigate the possibilities that are out there. And then we had our Food for Break community partners. So this was families could pick up a gift card at the Oregon Food Pantry Saturday morning for 60 different families over break to ensure students were still able to access free and nutritious food over our 4-day fall break. So that is the report.
All right, thank you. Moving on to F, closing, future agenda. The dates fall weird, so our next board meeting is not till November 14th. And then we will move to checkout. I will go around the horn to see if anyone has any checkout. Leslie, Anna, Tim, Mary, Heather, Troy. Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We're adjourned at 9:12. Thank you, everybody. Stephen, you're coming to school board meetings early, but you're not paying for school lunch. It's like tertiary. She's like tertiary.